big engineering errors. The human being has unlimited intelligence, and in his attempt to make or build great projects comes to sin by taking things lightly. Here is a compilation of engineering errors and the dire consequences for those who were nearby. Tay Rail Bridge, 1879. This railway bridge that crosses the Fjord of Tay, in Scotland, of approximately 3.5 kilometers, was the cause of a tragedy. Designed by the engineer Edgar Contreras, and built on the basis of a structure already used before, in the construction of the Crystal Palace, it did not hold the weight. In December 1879, during a storm, the central part of the bridge collapsed, taking a train with it. Among the 75 people who died in the accident was the engineer's son-in-law. It is said that this was due to serious errors in the design and the material they used. Skylab, 1973. The first U.S. space station. It was irretrievably damaged during the launch because some engineers had erred by not taking into account the aerodynamics of the shield against meteoroids and solar panels. When the crew were not busy with constant repairs, they complained about the extreme heat on board. On July 11, 1979, it fell on Australian territory, and NASA had to pay a fine of $400 for its garbage. Tank of a purity distillation company, 1919. We had to store the molasses. Molasses is a thick liquid product derived from sugar cane, somewhere. How about in a dilapidated tank 15 meters high and 27 meters in the middle of Boston? The structure was painted brown to hide the leaks. Finally it exploded, possibly due to fermentation, causing molasses waves of a height of 4.5 meters that fell on the city, killing 21 people. The catwalks of the Hyatt Regency Hotel, 1981. The intertwined walkways between the different floors of the hotel atrium collapsed, like dominoes, causing a shower of debris that fell on hundreds of participants in a dance contest. The cause, a tremendously negligent design and the use of beams that could only support 30% of the load. Northeastern U.S. Power Plant, 1965. A single-activated protective relay in Ontario overloaded nearby circuits and triggered a chain of blackouts that left 30 million people without power for 13 hours. A fragile design, free of redundancies, made it possible for this to happen eventually. After decades of repairs and upgrades, in 2003 it happened again. Citigroup Center, 1978. Last-minute changes in the structural clamps of this Manhattan skyscraper made it vulnerable to collapse due to high winds. With a hurricane pushing hard through the city, the builders rushed to reinforce the tower by welding two 51mm steel plates. Of thickness over 200 joints weakly screwed. Airship R101, 1930. 7 years before the Hindenburg disaster, the British thought it would be fun to shop around in a cloth bubble that held 155,000 cubic meters of hydrogen. On its inaugural flight, the wind tore the airship's cover, and that was the city of humanity. Vasa, 1628. 300 years before the Titanic, the Vasa was the largest sailing vessel of its time that managed to navigate. The overburdened Swedish ship ruled the seas for just a mile before making water because of how low the holes were for their cannons, so it soon capsized. McDonnell Douglas DC-10, 1970s. Before solving their problems, almost 1,000 people around the world lost their lives because of this 290-ton competitor of the Boeing 747. Winery doors that were fired, hydraulic lines crushed, and engines that were released mid-flight were just some of the first problems faced by this heavyweight. Firestone 500 radial tires, 1970s. These tires with curved steel spokes allowed the water to infiltrate between the drawing, which caused the ribbons to oxidize and the drawing to separate, which usually happened at high speeds. Dozens of dead later, Firestone blamed consumers, and later recalled 10 million tires. Dam of San Francisco, 1928. The self-taught engineer William Mulholland built this dam in Los Angeles on faulty foundations and ignored the geology of the surrounding canyon. Also despised the cracks that began to appear as soon as it began to fill. 5 days later, the dam broke down, killing 450 people and destroying entire cities, as well as the Mulholland race. An error of calculation of the company Texaco changed a complete ecosystem in the state of Louisiana, 1980. The Piner Lake had about 3 meters of average depth, reaching 60 meters the deepest part, and was composed of fresh water. A large salt mine operated on one of its banks and several of its levels extended below the lake. The Texaco company was drilling for oil on an artificial platform inside the lake, when an error in the calculations caused the drill to the third level of the mine. Strangely, there were no fatal human victims, although 3 dead dogs were reported.